Hello again, PCQI, and welcome back to our All About Compliance channel. In our segment today, we're going to be discussing our GMP training under food category, section personnel, cleanliness, subsection clothing, and personnel belongings. Right? Let's do this. Here we go again. Alright, PCQI, here we go. GMP training under food, personnel, cleanliness, clothing, and personal belongings segment. This is part of our 21 CFR Part 117.10 personnel under the cleanliness requirements, and let's get it going. Cleanliness. All persons working in direct contact with food, food contact surfaces, and food packaging materials must conform to hygienic practices while on duty to the extent necessary to protect against allergen, cross-contact, and against contamination of food. The methods for maintaining cleanliness include storing clothing or other personal belongings in areas other than where food is exposed or where equipment or utensils are washed. So again, PCQI, now that we have the requirements in front of us, right, about storing clothing or other personal belongings, so let's take a look at this type of policy as we put it together. So let's make some assessment. Like I said in previous videos, if you're following the GMP training for the food category, right, it's based on a hazard analysis assessment. So same thing with this one. If you are performing that, you're going to start asking some questions. So one of it first is you saw the word storing clothing. So automatically you're thinking of storage. So it's going to be lockers. So let's kind of dive into that. Do we have lockers for our team, right? Do we have enough of them? That's the next question, right? So after we have that answers, for our first or second shift, what does it look like for shift change? Okay, PCQI. So we need to take a look at that. Are they going to be exchanging locks and codes? For their locks, are we issuing them the lock? Is it a key? Is it with codes on it? How do we access the locker? Let's say, there's an emergency and our teammate can access their locker. Somebody's going to be sent there. Who accesses it, right? Is it HR? Is it the supervisor? What is your policy for that? What is your procedure of accessing that, right? And if we are giving them their own locks with the code, do we have a register of everybody and their code? So just in the event that we have an emergency or we need to access that particular locker for that particular team member, what does that look like? If we're issuing them keys, do we get a duplicate copy, right? So these are some of the things that you need to do to assess and make sure it's part of your your PFL, your program policy procedures. Obviously the forms we talked about, the registers, and then training materials after this when you're putting these together, okay? So let me see here. Do we have a policy against weapons, for the lockers, right? I've been to audit where I opened it and I see a handgun or a knife that's longer than 6 to 8 inches long. So what is your policy for that? Are they allowed? Right? So those are very, very, topics that, or sensitive topics that you're going to want to put in your policy or your procedures and whatnot. What is your QA audit checklist look like for your locker inspection? Do you perform those, and what do you look for? Other part of it is, what about food stuff? You got leftover candy bar, snacks. What does that look like? Do you allow that, right, in the lockers if you don't have these type of facilities that necessary for them to take their breaks, or you don't have a cafeteria or a break area where there's no refrigerators or whatnot, and people bring in their packed lunch? What does that look like? They're going to use their locker, right? So so you need to assess that, okay? And then also on the storing of clothing part of the requirement, this is not just that part of the locker, right? So as a PCQI, you also need to assess the clothing part of our production. So what it also means, my interpretation on this one is, let's say your lab coats, right? You're issued a lab coat, or your maintenance Blue Bunny suit, right? Your one suit, whatever that is, as well as your rain gear, raincoat. These are clothing that you're going to be using to perform an activity. So you also need to make an assessment of those storage, right? So what I mean by that is, let's just start from your personnel walking into the PPE station. So that's one part. Are they in racks, right? For that. Okay. So if they're in racks, are they identified as clean and then soiled, or are they just clean? Okay. And then you have a bin where they put the soiled, issued outer garments or clothing at this point. So that's one. Okay. Two is when people are taking breaks, right? Depending on your policy, are they going to use a fresh one? So if there are, so that's going to go straight to the soiled bin, right? But if they're not, they tend to hang them. Okay, they're gonna hang them. They're gonna go do their breaks, or use the facilities, and then they're gonna come back and put the same thing on, right? So let's be mindful in production. Things splatter on us, right? If we're doing dry powder, you got powder, you got other particles of production. And also, if you're running a different production, for example, let's say you're running a non-allergenic material, and then you're going to be running something with allergens on it, right? So what does that look like for you on your clothing? So now you're going to, let's say you're following the best practices of running a non-allergen product, which is great. That's protected. And then you're going to then run an allergen product. So now it's on you. Now I take a break and I hang it outside, right? Maybe, I've seen areas where the hooks on the wall are inside that processing room. I'll hang it and then step outside. I don't agree with it, but that's what I've observed. So now I'm going to start asking questions. So how does that person access it back? Going to the PPE station, right? So sometimes they move it outside. So you actually walk outside, you toss everything out, gloves and whatnot, but you save your coat and you're going to hang it. So now, with this scenario, you ran the B product with has an allergen on it. You're gonna hang it, so it's on the hook. The clothing is hitting the wall. It's on the wall, right? So the next shift, you're gonna take it. You see what I'm saying? So now you got transfer. Okay, so it's pretty much just a PCQI. You're like a criminal investigator, right? I think we're gonna have to have that mindset, right? Kind of like, okay, what's happening, and you're always constantly investigating. Okay, so let's go back to the point. So now these are the things that baffles me, PCQI, right? When I'm making an observation, I ask those questions, I write them down, and then I make an assessment. I'm like, what does that look like? Okay, is that okay? I'm like, yep, that's the procedure. That's okay. Now I'm going to start asking a question. Okay, so if that's the protocol, okay, I get it, I accept it, but can we, can you show me your sanitation procedure for that station now, right? Now you got all these walls with a bunch of hooks on it, and you got all the, storage of clothing, right? We see that a lot. What does that look like? Does that get sanitized, and when? Right? Because what I'm worried about this is the cross-contamination on the allergens. Okay, I think you're getting that part now. That's the main focus part of that, and then the rest of the pathogens and the bacteria and all of that. Especially when you're dealing with other products, the wet products. Every 20 minutes, right? It's on you. It's the bacteria, the growth. It's just you're the carrier, right? You're the contagion at this point. Okay, so I'm looking at that. So food defense is kicking in. I'm like, how am I going to protect the food? I need to defend it, right? And we are PCQI as preventive controllers, so we need to ask those questions. So what does that look like, right? What does that sanitation look like? Okay, so you need to make these assessment. So when you see this thing on 21 CFR 117, which is our current good manufacturing practices for HARPC, and you just look at that, don't overlook the part that the storing of clothing is just not thinking, oh, just personal belongings, I need a locker and whatnot. You got to look at your process how do we store those? When we use the restroom, I've seen it where the hook is outside the restroom. You go in, you do your business, and you wash your hands. You come out, they put the coat back on, right? And I'm going, okay, but you have to start over from top to bottom, right? Okay, so and that's another topic that we're going to discuss later on, right? Like I said, PCQI, I know some of you, they rather email because I get them, right? And you don't want to comment below, getting identified on the process. I get it. I appreciate the email. That's why we're constantly creating videos of 1 to 4 videos every day, believe it or not, just on these topics. It's just because it's just such a big commitment to do food safety as a PCQI, right? And that's why I always commend our PCQI on the field. And thank you, okay, for keeping us all safe in our, as much as you can, I get it, for our food safety management system. All right, let's go back in here. So, so we talked about the hooks and the wall, right? My thing here, is it a washable surface? Because sometimes the walls that are outside, they don't have those water resistant walls installed, like FRP system, or they have epoxy painted on it, and that whole area, it's not washable. You can't use a foamer and whatnot, or just maybe gypsum or drywall, right? So now we have issues of some of our uniforms or coats that are issued to us may be wet process, or the powder sticks to it. You know what I mean. So that's kind of where it is. Sanitizing that area is always a questionable thing for me. And believe it or not, I swab those, as part of our discovery swabbing ventures that we'll talk about in future videos as well. Okay, we talked about the production line in a previous comment some minutes ago. What does that look like? As well as, different zones when you're talking about, this type of clothing where you step out from different zone and this one area does not have the same requirement when it comes to your clothing that you have. In this particular example, let's just use a lab coat, over garments in what we do every day. So I've seen some parts where I go in and I'm issued all of this equipment, and then I do my activities in this one section, and then there is a door that I go, but there are no. The best way to say it is, I take off my coat because it's not required on that section, but I don't have a placement. Do I put it back? There's no bin that there says soiled, right? Deposit your soiled garments here, whatever, right? I'm holding on to it, right? And I'm going through the warehouse, and then I go to the next one, and then I put it on, right? So obviously that process has been reevaluated, because it's just not effective. Because you're now carrying this thing and you're walking all over the warehouse and and outside doing your inspection, because that one piece of it was missing, where you just have to physically put your lab coat in that part of it, or maybe you take it and then you have another area where you stored all those soiled ones. But reevaluate that, because if it's not set up properly, it's doomed not to be followed correctly. Does that make sense? So as a PCQI, we need to put those proposal together, have an open communication with our team, and they might say, oh yeah, we do that because we have to rewear it at this section, where when we go to the actual production, all of that comes off anyways, because we're going to put something that's fresh. So what does that look like, right? Put those procedures in place, your process flow, and make sure all of the resources that are required are present, okay? And they're available, and make your life a lot easier as a PCQI, right? So anyway, so let me end the segment here, PCQIs. Thank you for once again for your viewership and joining us. And once again, if you see value to the content that we are putting out there on these videos, I know they're not super perfect, right? And we're just trying to get them out there to you. Anyways, shoot me an email. Thanks again, PCQI, for your viewership. Until next time, Take care and have a great day. Bye for now. Contact us. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thanks again, PCQIs. Have a good one.